Hello everyone and welcome back to another book review. Today I am going to be reviewing the next entry in my Hugo Award series. Now there was a long delay in this review series, and that is because it was very difficult to obtain a copy of this book. And this book was the 1955 winner of the best novel, winner of the Hugo Award that is, and that was The Forever Machine, also known as They'd Rather Be Right, by Frank Riley and Mark Clifton. I believe those are the two authors who contributed to this book. So winner of the 1955 Hugo Award. However, not only did my library not have it, almost no other library in my state seemed that I could find to have a physical copy on hand that I could borrow. So I wound up having to go through like a library's ebook system to get it, which is not something I really like to do. So I finally obtained it and I finally read it, and yeah, this is my review of it. So like I said, this did win the Hugo in 1955. However, what I find when I read old stuff is the genre has kind of grown, and sci-fi, fantasy, speculative fiction, all of that has kind of grown with it. So things are a little different, and what was considered really good back then maybe has changed a little bit to now. This book centers on a couple scientists and a man with telepathic powers named Joe, who are building a machine they call Bossy. And this machine is going to be the perfect therapist. It's going to connect to your brain and you're going to figure out what went wrong and fix all your, they call it tension. So like removing all these presupposed beliefs, and you're just being replaced with pure science and removing your tension. But in order to be able to do this, you kind of have to be open to change. So they build this thing, and they're having to build it in secret because there's kind of this oppressive government feel in the United States. It's never really touched on exactly, but there's this opinion control that's kind of controlling the main narrative, and this thing is very secretive. So the two scientists are working, and Joe, who is kind of acting like he's below the scientists, is also kind of like running the whole thing from the top with his telepathic powers. And they have to go hide with these friends, including this old woman in this shady part of town where they finish it, and then to test the machine, they recruit the woman whose name is Mabel, and they hook her up to it and they run their experiment. And basically, not only does Mabel come out a totally different person, free of all sorts of prejudices and tensions and non-scientific beliefs, she also comes out as a very, very young woman who's very, very attractive. And of course, everybody takes off. And I'll leave it at that point. That's, I don't know, maybe halfway through the book, perhaps, possibly, and the rest of the book is kind of the world having to grapple with this new machine. Who gets to have it? Who gets to be rejuvenated by it? What are the restrictions? What can and can't it do? And all the different questions about that. This book, the first thing I want to point out is that this book won the award in 1955, so it was written in the 1950s, and I feel like it shows that, especially in the way that women are portrayed. I just feel like there were some of the not flattering depictions of women in the book. And not just when they described her transformation from old to young, but just kind of the way they talked about it and the way that women never seemed to play a central role, which when I read these older books, I have to keep in mind that the authors were living in that time and that reality. So yeah, I guess it's to be expected. I just feel like from a modern reader reading this book, it very much stands out, the gender difference and the way that the authors speak about women. And I don't really feel like they did it consciously. I feel like they didn't do it consciously, but it just kind of came out because it's their beliefs, which is ironic because maybe Bossy would have set them right with that, with a little bit of her therapeutic machining, its therapeutic machining, which actually reminds me of another Hugo Award. I think it was the novella, and that was Damnation Alley, which was very, very interesting to me, but just one of their depictions of women just probably would not have gone over very well today. But again, it's a product of its time. So going back to They'd Rather Be Right. Besides the depiction of women, which is really just more of like, okay, it's coming out of the 1950s, I kind of expect it, and while it probably won't go over well with a modern reader, I understand kind of where it was coming from. Nothing in the book grabbed me, and as I was reading it, there was nothing really that I disagreed or that strongly provoked a reaction out of me, in that I was never like, oh, I don't like this plot line, or I don't like this character, or I don't like the way the authors did this. I feel like the questions they asked were fair and interesting. I feel like it could have been good. I feel like it was full of really good potential, but it just didn't grab me. And therefore, I would probably give it a 2-star, which seems very, very low. And maybe someone else who's read this book has a very similar experience to me, but I read it and nothing captured me. And that's just, yeah, that was, as I was reading it, I just was waiting for something to hook me and for me to get into a story, which usually happens. And even books that I would rate like average, like pretty good, kept me entertained, 3-star read, I'm hooked at some point and I'm wanting to read. But this one I really had to just kind of power through because first of all, I knew it was so difficult for me to obtain the book. And second, I wanted to read everything else, but I wanted to read these Hugo Awards winners and nominees in order. So I'm gonna have to read this to read the next one if I want to follow my schedule. And so I just had to power through it. There's nothing beyond that I had a really strong critique or feeling about. It just never captured me. It never got me. And I think, yeah, it was kind of disappointing because I feel like there was a lot of potential. It's a very interesting concept. If someone can be rejuvenated to youth, who deserves it, who controls it, who's in charge of it, telepathic powers, how is that going to go over? Which that was less touched on than the like philosophical implications of Bossy, the machine. But yeah, I feel like there's a lot of interesting potential there, and I just don't think it lived up to what I thought it was going to do or how I thought it was going to go, which, yeah, it kind of makes me surprised that it won the award that year. Maybe nothing else good was being written that year, so this one took the cake. But I'd love to hear what you read or what you think about it. Because it was so difficult for me to find in the public libraries in my state, including some very large public libraries, it makes me wonder how many people have actually read this book, and I'd love to hear from anyone else who have read this book, what they thought about it, what their impression was, and yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Other than that, everyone, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you for watching.